Have you ever wondered how resilient you are? How you handle stress, failure, and setbacks in your life? Do you melt down, unable to cope? Or do you reframe and move forward? Think about it for a moment. How have you coped in the past with the curveballs that life throws at you? We're all faced with those unexpected challenges that test our limits. The big question is, how can you change or improve your reaction to these situations? What is it that creates our resilience and makes us stronger? Is it something we're born with, or can we develop it over time? I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm privileged to be talking to one of the founders of the Institute of Child Psychology, Tania Johnson. Tania and her fellow co-founder Tammy are registered psychologists, registered play therapists, and most importantly, mums. The Institute of Child Psychology was created by a shared passion to empower parents and caregivers to help children lead emotionally healthy lives. Tania was born in South Africa, where she received an honours degree in psychology. She spent several years teaching in Taiwan before adventuring to places like Mount Everest Base Camp, the Andes, and Bolivia. She then completed a one-year internship in the cancer treatment centres in America in Chicago, where her focus was on supporting patients in the stem cell unit. Tania then earned her master's degree in counselling from City University of Seattle. She and her husband were foster parents to 4 First Nations children for 5 years and have 2 biological children of their own. Tania works primarily from the perspective of attachment theory, which focuses on bonds between parents and children. Her gift, both in the therapy room and when writing, is to translate the latest research into concrete strategies that parents can implement in everyday life in their children. She's also a professor at both University College London and MIT, and the best-selling author of 3 books. Tania and Tammy have recently released The Parenting Handbook. This book offers a clear roadmap for addressing challenging parenting issues, promoting optimal brain development in children, and fostering positive mental health outcomes. I know that you are going to love the subject matter today as Tania and I talk about resilience. In this insightful conversation, we'll be discussing parenting and our children and how to rebuild resilience. It'll allow you to truly understand and connect the dots between why our children need our help and how we can help them. Tania, welcome to Parenting and Personalities podcast. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Kate, I know ever since we got in contact with you and we started setting this up, I've been looking forward to do this evening so much.
Oh, thank you. You have so much to talk about. And I love everything that you're talking about. My children are grown up now, but you never stop parenting, believe me. And I think even as parents of adults, all of this is relevant.
I agree.
To that degree. So today we're going to talk about resilience, which is one of the many topics that you cover in your book. But I would love to know, and I'm sure our listener would too, that what is it in your life that led you to the research and the work that you do today? Did it start from childhood? Where did you begin?
So I come from a family of helpers. I'm actually South African, now living in Canada.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was a priest. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a teacher. She's now a psychologist. So I come from a long line of helpers. But I think where I truly became really invested in helping children to heal was when I arrived in Canada. I had the incredible opportunity of being able to foster 4 First Nations children. They were a sibling group. And really, I always say that those children have been my greatest teachers, my greatest guides in my life so far more than any degree has given me. To watch these children come in struggling and to really be a part of their journey and watch them move towards love and connection was probably one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. So yes, it's probably a little bit genetically wired to do what I'm doing, but it was really my experience with the kids that really set in stone that this is what I wanted to do with my life.
Wow, what a wonderful thing to have done too. And it's experiences in life that are our greatest teachers, really, isn't it? You know, we can go and study all that we like, but unless it's happening in your life and you're going through those types of things, often it doesn't sink in. Doesn't have that same impact, does it?
No, it really doesn't. And I think being the mom of the 4 kids, the foster mom of the 4 kids, really gave me such a different perspective on what healing looks like, because it's one thing to sit in a clinic. I'm now a registered psychologist, but it's one thing to sit in a clinic and go, oh, this is what you need to do with your kid. This is how you connect with your kid. It's another thing to be on the other side of that and go, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. I've tried. It feels like it's 5 steps forward and then 3 steps back constantly. So I think having had the experience of being the foster mama, and now being the clinician has been really helpful too. And it opens up my heart to just the humanity of the whole experience for everybody when it comes to parenting.
Absolutely. So where are those children today?
Yes. So they're all grown up now. They're all in their 20s, all doing different things. Yeah. All amazing, incredible human beings. So they've all grown up. And now I have the beautiful experience to raise my own 2 little girls. So Una and Maya, they're now 6 and 8. And again, totally different journey with Una and Maya.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Is it totally different feeling in a sense, you know, bringing up children that are your own versus fostering the children, or is it all just a nurturing love full on?
Yeah, you know, I feel, Kate, and I don't know how much of this was also developmental for me in terms of my own development, but I feel like with the foster kids, there was so much that I had to learn, and there was lots of oopsies where I had to reflect and go, okay, that's not how I wanted to handle that, what I want to do differently. And even now I look back and I go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I would have done that differently. So I feel like the learning curve with the foster kids was very different. It was also full of lots of nurturing, lots of care, lots of love.
Yes.
But it definitely felt like a little bit of a harder journey. Whereas with my girls, same thing. I'm also learning. I'm also messing up. I'm also imperfect and messy lots of different times with the girls. But it doesn't feel as challenging or as hard.
Yes. There were 2 more as well, I guess.
Yes, let's not forget.
2's I always used to say 1's like a handbag, and 2, because, you know, you think, oh, this is so hard. And then you have 2 and it's like, oh, this is a bit harder. But 4 is very, very, very different in terms of every aspect. So you've obviously just done an amazing job.
Oh, thank you.
And the fact, you know, as long as your kids are still contacting you and they're still there for you, because, and I think this is the right point of time to say to people too, is that it's okay to fail. You know, like my kids, I am very close to my children, and I made mistakes along the way, but children are very forgiving. If you ask for forgiveness and if you acknowledge your mistakes, I think they love you so much that keeping that going, and I still make mistakes of them as adults. And when I ask them what mistakes I made with them as children, they tell me things that I didn't even know. And I'm thinking that I made other mistakes, and they come out with this thing. I think, oh, okay then. I'm really sorry about that. I do say to them, look, you'll end up on a psychologist's couch probably one day.
Yeah, how much did they cost in therapy?
Yeah, that's right.
I think the big thing, though, is really that our kids don't need perfect parents. They really don't. No. They need us to be our imperfect selves, but importantly, they need us to be able to reflect on where we need to repair, how we need to grow ourselves, and to share that in appropriate ways. So I always say to my parents who I work with, I'm like, they just need us to be mindful. They need us to be able to say sorry. They need us to be real. They don't need perfect. Perfect is hard. It sets them up for failure when we strive for that perfect.
It does. So my next question is, where did we as parents decide that we wanted to stop our children from failing? Like where did it come into our culture that all of a sudden we went, and this is me, like my early parenting, when I was a kid, you played pass the parcel, and if you didn't get a toy, most of the kids cried because they didn't get what was in the centre, but we knew that not everybody was a winner. You know, that was like, and there am I with my children putting a a lolly in every wrapping, making sure I stopped it on time so that everybody was happy and everything was good. Because in a way, our children's lack of, in terms of mental health, people might have thought that was too tough. We can't have winners because everybody else that loses feels sad. But it hasn't actually built a stronger-minded society. In fact, resilience is so low. So when did it happen?
As you say that, have you watched the Bluey episode with the
No, because I haven't got children young enough for Bluey. I'm thinking I'm going to catch that up when I'm a grandmother, but everyone tells me that it's worth watching.
Yes, Bluey is totally worth watching. It's my absolute favorite, but they have a beautiful episode on exactly this. The one dad who doesn't do any prizes, and then all the kids are like, oh, there's not a prize between each layer, but the whole little story has just...
Really? They do that?
Some really yes, they've got an exact episode on this. And I went through this myself with my girls, did pass the parcel with them, did not know that you were supposed to put prizes in between each layer. I now know that the new parenting rules is that there's a prize between each layer. But I think somewhere, I'm trying to think when it probably would have happened. I feel like in the 90s,
that'd be right,
there was a shift towards protecting our children more. And it's exactly what you're saying there, Kate. It was, we've got to watch out for these kids and we have to protect them with lots of cotton wool and make sure that everybody's feeling good. But inadvertently, and I understand, I think that everybody came in with the best intentions, right? Everybody needs to get a trophy. Everybody needs to be celebrated. And I do agree that everybody needs to be celebrated, but in different ways. Because if everybody's always the same, nobody ever has their turn to shine or to go, oh, I really, really, really wants to win that race and I didn't. And now I have to sit with these uncomfortable feelings. So I think that there's so much power when we let our kids succeed and when we let our kids actually fail, because that's where they learn in a safe space the full gamut of emotions. But when kids aren't given experiences where they can fail or fall down or know that they are capable of getting back up, how do they ever learn that? Where do they ever learn that?
That's right. And for me too, when did we become scared of failing? Failing, honestly, failing our children. In a sense, parents need to build a bit more resilience themselves too, because for us, and also the tools to handle the child melting down or whatever, which you have, developed over these years, weren't available for us either, in that sense of we didn't know what to do. My children got sent to their bedroom. And look, it was time out from me when I was angry or upset, and it worked. My kids were okay. They were all right with that. That's supposed to be not a thing nowadays. But I look and I go, they turned out all right. They're okay. But it is that my husband used to say, because they'd come home with their ribbons from sports day and they'd throw them in the bin because it meant nothing, because no one was a winner. And my husband would sit there and he would say, because he's very much, you got to win type of thing. And he would say, when they get out in the workforce, they have to win. They're not going to be, oh, that's okay, darling, everyone can have that job. So we did ourselves as parents take that out.
Absolutely. Yeah, and really we're calling this generation now the failure deprived generation. And it's exactly what you're saying, Kate, is that we're seeing that they're hitting 18, 19, 20, they're going to university and they're failing for the first time. And we're seeing, particularly in that age group, at least here in North America where we are, that we're having escalating rates of anxiety and depression. It's actually the highest age group for mental health issues. And I really think if we could look at things a little differently and go, how do we help our kids to be sad, to lean into failure, to be uncomfortable, to be able to cry with us without fixing it? Because when we give them those skills early on, those small little setbacks helps to build resiliencies for later on in life.
Absolutely. It so does. And I sit and I look at that too. And I feel like my children are the next stage on social media wasn't so bad. They kind of made it to there. But even our schooling system, my children went to a private school. And in year 12, my son brought home an essay, an English essay. And this teacher, because private schools need the money, they need to look good themselves. Okay, so he brought home an essay that this teacher had scrawled on, rewritten. And I looked at him and I said, Jack, if you want to get an A, she's just written it for you. So this is your choice. I said, she's done it. It's sitting there. And he rewrote it because he goes, he's very funny, but he said, all right, well, if you think that's going to be an A, I'll take it. But this is what teachers are also doing for our kids, is that they're not allowing them to struggle, to fail, to write better things themselves. I mean, we've got AI now, haven't we? But these are the things that the teachers didn't do for the kids either. So they get out and they go to uni, and the university lecturer says, hey, go home and do it yourself. And like you say, they're stuffed.
Absolutely.
So for the generation coming up of parents who are not my parenting age, tell us, what do you talking about resilience? What is a resilient child? Can you give me a kind of a definition of that?
So I think I've got a couple of definitions that I love. So one is really just simply to think of it as resiliency is our child's ability to hit a road bump, fall down, and then get back up. It's not about the failure, it's about the getting back up. And then when I look at it more from explaining from a neurological perspective, it's our ability to settle the stress response, and when we're ready, move forward with a thinking brain response. So I can go, oh my goodness, this test is so incredibly hard. I'm not going to be able to do this. I can experience that stress. It's okay for that stress to be there. But the next part is actually being able to go, okay, what do I want to do next? I need to take a few deep breaths. I need to have a little bit of water. What needs to happen next? Or I need to talk to my teacher about how I can prepare better for the next test. So it's stress. And then what's next? Thinking brain.
Because they haven't been taught that next step, have they?
No.
So let's talk about that next step. Look, you have in your book, your wonderful book, which I have spoken about in the introduction, you're talking about your chapter on resilience, and you have 3 pillars of resilience. And today I'd love to talk with you about the first one and what we can do as parents and the people listening, how they can parent for resilience.
So that first pillar is purpose. And purpose is an interesting one. And again, I think one that's got a little bit garbled. So I think in our fast-paced society, I almost think of it like an ADHD society. Everything's quick, right? On demand. I feel like sometimes purpose is like it's an engine. You've got to do this. What's the next thing? Without the actual depth or the roots. So when I think of purpose is something that drives us, something that gives us meaning, something that fulfills us. It anchors us into why we're actually here. And I think, Kate, you were just mentioning social media. I think that so many of our kids nowadays, what I hear from them is they really have lost that anchoring or that rootedness where they go, yeah, I matter, I count. It's important that I ... whatever it may be. So the first pillar is helping a child to really nurture their sense of purpose in the world.
So with that, let's talk about stress responses that you just modeled before with your thing. How do we, as parents and caregivers, model that stress response? I do know that I did it with my child the other day because he knocked a container of, he's 31, by the way. He knocked a container of cinnamon out of my cupboard and it smashed all over the floor. And he went, I didn't mean to. And I said, Jack, don't worry about it. Just go and get a dustpan and brush and we'll sweep it up. I've got more cinnamon in the cupboard. It's not an issue. And I feel that kind of is a role model, I hope, for him next time it happens for him, that he would do something like that. So is that the type of thing you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as we model for our kids, I think that very often we don't speak about it. I love the cinnamon example, but very often we don't speak about our own mistakes. So yeah, your mom got fired once, or yeah, dad got a speeding ticket. This is what dad needs to remember next time. Or when this happens, this is what I do. Or I'm really nervous to tell your auntie that we can't come to her birthday party. And some of me wants to just text her, but I know that the right thing to do is to pick up the phone and call her and say, sorry, we can't make it. So often we don't actually talk through these things with our kiddos. So things that come out in spurts, right? Like, why did you knock over the cinnamon? Or, oh, what am I going to do about your auntie's party? But we don't actually go through the components of the story. And storytelling is an integral part of parenting. There's another thing there, Kate, is that when we can tell them about my experience with auntie, or dad can talk about his experience with getting fired, kids are more likely to pay attention than when it feels like we're lecturing them or we're trying to tell them something. When it's just about me, mom's going to tell you a quick story. Make it quick. They don't focus for very long, so make it quick. But mom's going to tell you a quick story. They go, oh. And it might take a little while to settle, but that's the best form of teaching with our kids.
And in terms of doing that, because I am an extrovert, I talk all the time. So I do think that some people don't talk stuff through naturally as well. You know, that's a topic for another time. But I do think that awareness of making that effort to talk it through is huge for some people. I think that they just keep things in their head and often they will not talk about it. But we also went through that gratitude time, which of course I have nothing against. But we did used to sit at the dinner table and say, what was good about your day? And we didn't ever say what was bad, what was terrible, because everyone has something terrible happen in their day. And I kind of think that now, I think that's obviously coming in because people are talking about their failures. But I think that was very important too, because we did try to focus on everything being happy and good as well at the time.
Absolutely. And, you know, something that we do with my girls is what we call the rose and thorn, is at the dinner table, we'll say to them, okay, what was your rose today and what was your thorn? So what was difficult and what was a little bit easier today? Just to acknowledge that both of those sides are there. Kate, the other thing that kind of piques my curiosity as you're speaking is, I do think in past generations, along with what was good about your day, what made you happy today, was also a strong focus on the self-esteem movement, where it was, you know, stand in the mirror and say, I am strong, I am beautiful, I am powerful. And even though there is some research, a little bit of research that shows that internal self-talk, when it's rooted and anchored, important, can be helpful, we know that that is not actually where a healthy self-concept comes from. Healthy self-concept comes from believing I am competent and I can. So, and competency comes from repeated experiences of trying new things, sometimes falling down, but then again, getting back up. That is where healthy self-esteem comes from.
Yeah, it doesn't come from just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying that. Like you say, I think it's an experience. I went through, I was in that era where everybody did the self. I never did. I looked at myself in the mirror once, I said it, and I said, I don't believe that. You know, that's not something that really ever sat with me in that sense, because I do believe that you need to live the experience because it is the most important thing. Absolutely. So when we're talking about strengths with our children and pointing out our children's strengths, how do we do that to empower them without making it fake? How do we do that?
Such a great question. So with our kids as well, we really want to make sure that when we see that there's something that they're really engaged or interested in, and it doesn't matter what it is, if they're little and they're watching the little ants and maybe they're trying to like make a little pathway for the ants, or if they're painting a picture, whatever it might be, we want to give them lots of space. So lots of space to be able to explore where their curiosity lies. And if we are a parent or a caregiver and we're coming alongside them, we want to just sit quietly, witness what they're doing, try not to fill the space with too many words. As I say, tell your stories. There's a time and a place for our stories, but try not to fill the space with too many stories. And then when we're ready, we can say, oh, can you tell me a little bit about your picture? Or, I'm curious about what's going on over here. Or, this is an interesting pathway for the ants. Can you tell me why you chose it? And through our questions, my hope is that we're nurturing the depth of their experience. Our focus with our kiddos always needs to be on their journey instead of that final outcome. Because when we go, you're an amazing artist, or you're so smart, or you are the best piano player, all of our energy is going towards a product that they're giving to us. And so what we start to see is that their focus becomes on the external motivation that's there. And over time, that extrinsic motivation kind of withers away. Whereas if we can nurture internal, where it's like, oh, this is interesting, and I wonder why I did do that, or how do I create that song on the piano that I was thinking about? That's when we actually see kids' potential really increase instead of when we focus on those outcomes.
That's really great to hear, like good, very good to hear, because it was that time of success too. I was a school teacher during that time, and I did do, as you say, tell us about your picture and use those words. But then over the years with my own children, yes, you're right, the blanket, oh, you're really good at that. Or in fact, I probably didn't do that. I'm a bit of a realist. I told Cassie not to worry about going on Australian Idol because she wasn't a good enough singer.
Actually, Tania, was the other way.
Probably that was a mile that way. But there is that grounding in me that I wouldn't tell them they were amazing at something. I mean, my husband always used to say, if you're 5'2", you are never going to be a basketballer, a nationwide basketballer. It's not real, in that sense. And we do overpraise the children, yes, you're going to be amazing. You've done that really well. And like you say, so what happens to those children when they don't do well?
And what we end up seeing is when we say like, you're amazing or your math is so good, when those children inevitably hit an obstacle, they start to realize on a really deep level, oh, I cannot do this. And very often kids, we call it a fixed mindset. Kids who have come from a fixed mindset home end up withdrawing and they go, oh, I couldn't do that challenge. I don't want everybody to know that I'm not good at math. And so they withdraw and they aren't open to taking constructive feedback because now they're scared. Those defenses are up for them. Whereas for kiddos who have come from a growth mindset home where it's all about the journey, right? The nurturing of their experience of what's happening. When they hit those road bumps, they've really come to believe that their journey is about growth. So they go, oh, okay. When I make a mistake, this just helps me to sit back a little bit. This is how I learn. This is how the connections in my brain get stronger. What do I need to do now? And then they actually are able to listen to guidance. And what we see over time is that those kids keep on growing, whereas the kids from a fixed mindset home, they initially may do better. They may initially really thrive at math, for example, but that eventually those kids plateau because they will hit road bumps. And often they have such a hard time with those road bumps.
And I have only just read Carol Dweck's book on mindset. I was on holiday and I read it and I was like, oh my goodness, that is amazing. And the fact that you mentioned it, in your book is just fantastic. Because for people that aren't aware of that, it's just such a great concept, the fact that we all have fixed and we have growth, we can have both. And some people, I think I'm quite a fixed mindset person, but I do have times where I'm not, and I can see that, and I think that's really valuable. But I think it's really valuable to be able to concentrate on creating that growth mindset for you and your children. And I've changed my conversations with my kids, my older kids. And it's anyone.
Yeah, and sometimes, Kate, when I have this conversation with parents, they'll say like, "It's just such a natural thing," and like pops out of me like, "Oh, you're so smart," or like, "You're such a great ballerina," And I want to acknowledge, again, just the humanness of being a parent. You see your kid do something amazing. You're like, oh my goodness, you're such a good gymnast, whatever it is. That's okay. Like, there's no beat ourselves up over that. Yeah. But always go back afterwards and ask yourself in your head, how do I change this into a growth mindset moment too? So how do I, in the car, say to her, like, I couldn't believe it when you did those twirls. How did you learn that? So try put the focus there.
Yes, bring it back, because you're right. We all do. They're our little darlings, aren't they? Oh, you were so good, and you're only watching one when you're looking at a class. You're not looking at everyone else's kid. You're only looking at your own child anyway. So you don't know whether we're with someone else. But it really does. I in my research that I do for my podcast, and the perfectionism factor that sits in amongst all that this can also really affect those children that need to be helped through failure. It's such an important thing to do. Now, the other thing that I failed at dreadfully, and I'd love you to talk about, is helping with the chores. Because I just did everything because I didn't want any mess around the house. So tell us about helping with the chores and how important that is.
Kate, I think I just saw a whole lot of parents in my mind nodding their head as you said that. Just visualized it. So it's a tough one, and we can actually, when it comes to chores, the research right now shows us that we can get kids as young as 18 months beginning to help us. So, it can be like bring your plates, very, very little. So, or we can have just like as they get a little bit older, we can have a little broom and a dustpan and a broom, and they start to help us a little bit. The earlier we start with them, the better. Generally, kids have this natural propensity to want to help, but we tend to suffocate that energy in them because we go, I don't want you to help with the pancakes. This is going to take 6 times longer than it was supposed to. So when they're 3, when they're 4, they want to help, they want to bake, they want to cook, they want to cut. And we say, no. You go play with your dolls. I'll do it. Mommy will do it. Daddy will do it. But the research also shows us that when kids get involved in chores, it leads to what we call a family-centric culture, which is, again, what nurtures competency, cooperation, and deeper connection. Because then what happens in the house is we go, I belong to this family. This is what we do as a family. It also teaches kids that they are not there to be served. And, here in Canada, we very much have a child-centric culture, which is the kids play. The kids play, the kids play. But when we move it and we shift to there's a mom, maybe there's another mom, there's another caregiver, there's dad, there's grandma, whoever lives in this house, we all live here together. And so we all help and we all create, and this is what our family is about. Those children eventually move through their childhood with skills that really set them up for those early 20s, types of skills that we were talking about earlier. But unfortunately, many kids don't have that because they aren't involved in chores. So I think the message here is the earlier we get started, the better. Family-centric culture is way better than a child-centric culture within families. And even though it may be painful if you're starting later, if you're listening to us today and your kid is already 8 and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to start this, grit your teeth and get through it, because I can promise you right now that the pain of it will be worth it, but you have to be consistent in it. Yeah.
And I can tell our listeners now, as a person with adult children, start now. Just believe me, start now. Because my children have kind of only just left home fairly recently, and to tell the truth, that is their greatest gift, is leaving home, because they've had to do their own stuff. They actually come around to my place now and they make the table and they do this, and I'm standing there going, "Oh my goodness,
what happened here?"
It has happened. It has been a long time, but it has happened. So, and reading all the research around it, I really wish I had it, and I had the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that it is one of the most important things. And my son turned around to my husband when I talk about personalities all the time. So my husband is a person that loves to do, if someone says something's wrong, he fixes it. Okay, so he's a real fixer. And he never did any chores around the house because he can't do it. He doesn't care. He just pays someone to do it if there's something needs nailing in a wall or something fixing. And the other day my son said to him, "Dad, I wish you'd taught me how to use a hammer or how to do something like that," because he said, "I feel really silly when people, I have to just do something really simple like that." And so we said to him, "We'll give you some lessons, come around." But you don't realize what an impact it actually has on their lives when they leave home. So I think that is such a valuable comment, and it's so valuable. And, it doesn't, it's our adult parents, our adult children telling us they wish they had. So
totally. Yeah. Kate, I love your perspective in all of this, because now you're at the point where you can reflect back and go like, absolutely, I agree, or I don't agree, but I think it's so helpful when you've been through the whole journey to be able to look at that.
Yes.
The final thing there with chores really that I would love people to hold is that we don't want to pay kids for chores either. You don't get paid to be a part of the family. This is what we do as a family. And I think that that's a trap parents often get caught into, is pairing allowance with chores. And we don't want to do that.
That is very valid too, because I tried that as well. And the money just got more expensive. And so it doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
It really doesn't work in the long term.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And it's very valid. And that was, we didn't know about extrinsic and intrinsic when my kids were young. Didn't think about it. And I used to say, there's nothing wrong with bribery as long as there's no corruption involved. And look, it worked for me for a certain extent. But, so look, listen now and listen up, everybody, because it is really, that is something I really wish I hadn't done. So very, very valid. Now, I'm afraid I'm going to have to wind us up for today because it's so much and so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible expertise and knowledge with us all here today. I have learned so much as well, and I'll be passing mine on to my next generation.
Kate, it's been such a pleasure. I've loved every second of this.
Yeah. And look, I'm sure our listeners would love to learn more because you have the most amazing website, and I've spoken about that initially as well. Could you tell them where they can go and where they can find your new book, The Parenting Handbook?
So the Parenting Handbook, you can go to Amazon and it's available in Australia. To find out more about us, I actually would direct people to our Instagram. So Institute of Child Psychology, it's incredible. We have so many wonderful resources on there. We post often, we post a lot, lots of parenting tips for parents. So that's my favorite, is our Instagram. Our website is Institute of Child Psychology. And for those of you interested, we also have our own podcast. It's called the Child Psych Podcast,
which is a wonderful podcast. I've listened to so many episodes of that. And the other thing is I have your Insta as well. And because you do those small clips, they are such valuable learning. So fantastic. So we'll be back next week, you and I, with some more information on how to grow resilience, not only for those we're caring about, but for ourselves as well.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Remember, resilience is like a muscle. The more you work on it, the stronger it gets. It's crucial for us to build resilience, not only just for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren. By fostering a resilient mindset, we equip ourselves and the next generation with the tools to navigate life's challenges with grace and strength. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.